When I married Adam, I truly believed I had found the man of my dreams. He was everything I had ever wanted, kind, confident, funny, and always making me feel like the center of his world. We met at a charity event where he offered me a drink, and from that night, things moved fast. Within a year, we were married, living in a cozy home in Denver that we decorated together. I used to think our house was filled with love and laughter, the kind that would last a lifetime. Adam had this way of making life look easy. He worked hard, always had time for me, and made sure I never doubted his affection. I would wake up every morning to a cup of coffee he'd made just the way I liked it, extra cream, no sugar. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our little traditions. Every Friday night was movie night. Every Sunday morning, pancakes and jazz music. I thought those moments were real. But even when things look perfect, something deep inside you can sometimes sense a quiet shift, something small, something off. I remember the first time I felt it. Adam had come home late one night, later than usual. He kissed me on the cheek, said he'd been caught up at work, and went straight to the shower. It was normal, believable even. But when I hugged him, there was a faint scent that didn't belong to me, a perfume I couldn't name. I brushed it off. After all, I trusted him completely. Love makes you want to believe, even when you shouldn't. I told myself I was overthinking, that long hours and stress could explain his distant eyes and tired smile. But in the quiet moments, when he wasn't looking, I started to notice little things. His phone always turned face down, his sudden need for privacy, the way he smiled at texts that he never let me see. Still, I kept pretending everything was fine. I laughed at his jokes, cooked his favorite dinners, and kissed him goodnight like always, because I didn't want to believe that the man I'd built my life around could be hiding something. I remember sitting on our porch one evening, watching the sunset, while he typed away on his phone inside. I told myself that we were just going through a rough patch, that love always found a way back. But deep down, I could feel something slipping, something I couldn't hold on to, no matter how hard I tried. Sometimes the truth hides behind smiles and small lies. And at that time, I didn't know how close I was to uncovering a secret that would change everything. I still believed in our marriage, in us. But soon, I'd learn that even the most beautiful life can start to crumble quietly, one secret at a time. After that night, things started to feel different between us. Adam began coming home later than usual, always blaming work. At first, I believed him. He had a demanding job, and late meetings weren't new. But soon, those meetings turned into overnight business trips I had never heard about before. He started dressing better too, wearing cologne more often, and paying attention to his appearance in a way he hadn't in years. When I asked about his schedule, his answers were vague. Just meetings, he'd say, or, you wouldn't be interested, it's all boring office stuff. He used to tell me everything, where he was going, who he was meeting, even the silly things that happened at work. But now, it felt like he was hiding a piece of his life from me. The biggest change came with his phone. Adam had always been relaxed about it, leaving it on the table or bed without a thought. But suddenly, it became glued to him. He kept it in his pocket, even when we were eating. He turned off notifications, set new passwords, and if it rang, he'd step out of the room to answer it. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore how uncomfortable he looked whenever I walked in unexpectedly. Then came the perfume incident. It was late one night when he came home from another business dinner. I went to hang up his jacket and caught a soft, floral scent that wasn't mine. It was sweet and unfamiliar, the kind of smell that doesn't come from a restaurant or a hug from a coworker. My stomach turned. I didn't say anything right away, but the thought wouldn't leave my mind. The next morning, I asked him casually, "Were you sitting next to someone wearing perfume last night? Your jacket smells a little different." He laughed, not in a warm way, but in a sharp, dismissive one. "Laura, are you serious? You're getting paranoid," he said, shaking his head. "You've been watching too many crime dramas again." That word, paranoid, hit me like a slap. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Cold, distant, like I was the one doing something wrong by asking a question. I stayed quiet, not wanting to start a fight, but inside something cracked. After that, I began noticing more signs. The sudden weekend conferences, the messages he'd type quickly and delete even faster, the way he avoided eye contact when I spoke to him. It felt like the man I married was fading, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Every time I tried to bring it up, he'd change the subject or make me feel guilty for asking. I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I really was overreacting. But deep down, a small voice kept whispering that something wasn't right, that the man I loved was keeping secrets from me. And that voice only grew louder with time. I tried to push the doubts away, hoping things would go back to how they used to be. I told myself that Adam was just stressed from work, that I was reading too much into small things. But once a thought like that settles in your mind, it doesn't leave easily. It grows quietly, turning every small moment into a question. He began spending more weekends volunteering for extra projects. Adam was never the kind of man who gave up his free time for work before, but suddenly, these projects became a regular thing. He'd leave early on Saturday mornings and come home late Sunday night, tired and distracted. When I'd ask about it, he'd give quick answers like, "We had to meet a deadline," or "I just stayed longer to help the team." It sounded reasonable, but something about his tone always felt off. The phone calls became another thing I couldn't ignore. Whenever I entered the room, he'd stop talking or end the call mid-sentence. Once, I caught a glimpse of a smile on his face as he whispered something softly, but the moment he saw me, his expression changed completely. He locked his phone and pretended it was a client call. I wanted to believe him, but his voice gave away more than his words did. Then there were the receipts. I started finding them in his jacket pockets and in the car. Expensive dinners, wine bars, and hotels. The names of the places were ones we had never been to together. When I'd ask about them, he'd shrug and say they were business meals. But how many business dinners end with champagne and desserts for two? The hardest part was pretending everything was fine. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where he really was when he said he was working late. My heart told me the truth, but my mind refused to accept it. I didn't want to be that woman who goes through her husband's things or questions his every move. I wanted to trust him the way I always had. One evening, over coffee, I told my best friend Emily that something didn't feel right. She listened quietly, then said, "Laura, if your gut is screaming, it's probably right." Her words hit me hard because deep down, I already knew she was right. My gut wasn't whispering anymore. It was shouting. After that talk, I stopped making excuses for him. I began watching more carefully, not out of anger, but out of a need for truth. Every late-night call, every half-smile, every vague answer added another piece to the puzzle. I didn't have proof yet, but my heart already knew. Something was wrong, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that my marriage was slowly falling apart, one lie at a time. It was a quiet Thursday night, one of those evenings that felt heavy for no reason. Adam had just come home from work and said he needed to shower before dinner. I was sitting on the couch trying to read, but my mind kept drifting. Something about his mood felt off, too calm, too practiced. Then I heard his phone buzz on the coffee table beside me. Normally, it was always locked, but this time the screen lit up, and to my surprise, it was open. I stared at it for a few seconds, arguing with myself. I didn't want to be that person, the one who goes through their partner's phone. But my heart was pounding, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The message that flashed across the screen made the decision for me. It read, "Did you get my picture? I miss you already, red heart, Sabrina." I froze. My stomach turned cold, and my chest tightened. I opened the messages, my fingers trembling so badly, I almost dropped the phone. There were dozens of texts, late-night conversations, inside jokes, photos I couldn't bear to look at, and plans for weekends together. She wasn't a coworker or a friend. She was someone else in his life, someone who called him baby. The more I scrolled, the worse it got. "Can't wait to see you again," she wrote in one message. "She still thinks you're at that conference?" That line made my whole body go numb. He wasn't just lying to me, he was laughing about it with her. Every word on that screen cut deeper than the one before. There were also hotel confirmations, dinner reservations, and flight details, all things he had claimed were work-related. I could see the exact weekends he had said he was working late, or out of town for meetings. All of it matched. All of it was a lie. I sat there, staring at the screen, the sound of the shower running in the background. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind was spinning, but everything around me felt silent. It was like my world had stopped, frozen between the truth and the life I thought I had. When I finally set the phone down, I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I couldn't. The pain was too sharp, too real for tears. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something colder, something that felt like clarity. In that moment, I knew things would never go back to how they were. The man I loved had betrayed me, and no excuse or apology could change that. But I also knew one more thing. I wasn't going to fall apart. Not this time. My heart might have been breaking, but my mind was already shifting towards something else. Something stronger. I took a deep breath, wiped my hands, and whispered to myself, "Okay, now I know." And with that, the part of me that believed in him died quietly, replaced by something far more dangerous: determination. After I found out, I decided not to explode. For 1 week, I wore the face he expected. I smiled at him over breakfast, joked about work, and made his favorite dinners. I kissed him goodnight and behaved like everything was normal. I wanted him to keep underestimating me. While I played the part, I quietly collected proof. I took screenshots, saved emails, and kept every receipt I could find. When I found hotel confirmations or reservations, I slipped copies into a folder. I recorded a call once he thought he was alone. I didn't do it out of spite at first. I did it because I needed to know the truth, and later, because truth could become my protection. I stopped leaving things to chance. I checked bank statements for charges that didn't add up. I scanned the glove box and the jacket pockets for paper trails. I kept a small notebook and wrote dates, times, and short notes about odd behavior. It felt clinical, like documenting a case. That was precisely the point. I was building a record I could use when the time came. At night, when the house was quiet, I made a plan. I thought about what I wanted from the situation, not just anger, but fairness. I wanted a clear break and a fresh start. I wanted to protect my finances and my peace. I wanted him to face the consequences of his choices without dragging me through humiliation. I made an appointment with a lawyer. I remember sitting in her office, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I explained what I knew, handed over the folder, and listened. She spoke plainly about options and reality. She told me what evidence would be useful and what would not matter in court. She explained how the law worked in practical terms and how I could keep my life intact no matter what happened next. Her calm steadied me. The lawyer advised me to keep everything organized and to avoid impulsive confrontations. She warned about social media, about dramatic scenes that look bad on paper, and about the importance of a clear, documented timeline. I promised to be careful. I wasn't planning a public spectacle. I was planning a legal and emotional closure that left me able to move forward. I also started separating some of our finances quietly. I opened a small account in my name and began moving money into it, slowly and legally. I updated passwords and secured important documents. These were practical steps, not spiteful ones. I was preparing for a new chapter, not plotting revenge for its own sake. Every day I kept smiling. I cooked, I laughed. I lived in the small moments, so our home didn't look like a battlefield to the outside world. He never guessed what I was doing in the background. He assumed his lies were safe and that I was blind. That arrogance made it easier to prepare without interference. By the end of the week, I felt different. The shock had faded, replaced by a quiet determination. I had a file, a plan, and a lawyer who knew the facts. I had taken the first practical steps toward reclaiming my life. I wasn't happy, but I was ready. The next move would be mine, deliberate, measured, and final. A few days later, Adam told me he had another business trip coming up. Seattle this time, he said casually over dinner, as if it was just another work event. But I already knew the truth. I had seen the hotel booking under both his and Sabrina's names. He wasn't going there for business. He was going there for her. I nodded like everything was fine. That sounds exciting, I said, forcing a smile. Inside, my heart felt cold, but my face didn't show it. He talked about meetings and clients, rehearsing his lie like a script. I listened, pretending to be the supportive wife he thought I still was. When the day came for him to pack, I offered to help. You always forget something, I joked lightly. He laughed, kissed my cheek, and let me fold his shirts and place them neatly in the suitcase. What he didn't know was that I slipped a small GPS tracker into one of the side pockets. It was hidden well, and I knew it would tell me exactly where he went. The morning he left, he kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. I'll call you when I land, he said. Don't stay up too late. I smiled and waved from the doorway, pretending to be the same trusting wife who'd once waited eagerly for his return. But the moment his car disappeared down the street, I turned around and went to my laptop. Within an hour, I booked a flight to the same city, same hotel, and the same dates. When I arrived in Seattle, I felt a strange calm, like everything was moving exactly as it should. I checked into the hotel under a different name and kept my distance. My hands shook slightly as I tracked his location through the app. The little blinking dot showed he was only a few floors away. That evening, I went down to the lobby, pretending to check my phone near the lounge area. And there they were, Adam and Sabrina, sitting together on the couch, holding hands like lovers who had no care in the world. She laughed at something he said, and he looked at her with a softness I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened, and I felt the burn of betrayal deep inside me. It wasn't just the cheating. It was how easily he could smile while destroying everything we'd built. For a second, I thought about walking up to them, about shouting, about ending it right there. But I didn't. I forced myself to stay still. I reminded myself why I was there, not to cause a scene, not to warn him, but to witness. I wanted proof that couldn't be denied. So, I took out my phone and captured a few quiet pictures, enough to speak the truth later without me saying a word. They looked so happy, unaware that the woman he'd betrayed was standing only a few feet away. I turned and walked back to my room slowly, every step heavy but steady. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I just whispered to myself, almost done. That night, as I watched the lights of the city outside my window, I realized something. This wasn't just about catching him anymore. It was about reclaiming control, the control he thought I didn't have. 2 weeks after the trip, I decided it was time. I had all the proof I needed, pictures, messages, receipts, everything. But I didn't want a screaming match behind closed doors. I wanted him to face what he'd done in front of the people whose respect he valued most. I planned it carefully. I called his parents and told them I wanted to surprise Adam with a small dinner to celebrate his promotion. His boss and a few close friends were invited too. Everyone thought it was going to be a warm, happy evening. I cooked, decorated the dining room, and set the table like it was a holiday. Adam had no idea. When he arrived home that evening, he looked relaxed, almost proud. He had his arm around me, smiling like the perfect husband. He greeted everyone warmly, shaking hands and hugging his mother. I could see how confident he felt, how sure he was that his double life was still hidden. It almost made me laugh, not out of joy, but from the irony of it all. Dinner started normally. We all sat around the table, talking and laughing. Adam told a few stories about work, pretending to be the successful, loyal man everyone admired. I watched him closely, waiting for the right moment. When dessert was about to be served, I stood up and said, "Before we end the night, I have something special to show everyone." He looked surprised but didn't question it. He thought it was a slideshow of memories, vacations, birthdays, maybe old pictures of us together. I walked over to the big TV in the living room, took a deep breath, and pressed play. At first, the screen showed a few pictures of us, our wedding, our first home, a few smiles that now felt fake. Then the next slide appeared. Text messages between him and Sabrina. Photos of them in the hotel lobby. Screenshots of their plans, their words, their laughter behind my back. The room went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes shift toward him. His mother covered her mouth, whispering his name. His father looked down, ashamed. His boss stood frozen for a moment before quietly picking up his coat and walking out. No one said a word. The only sound was the quiet hum of the TV as the images changed. Adam didn't move. His face drained of color, and he just sat there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. He tried to speak, but no words came out. I looked at him and said calmly, "I thought everyone should see who you really are." He stood up suddenly, muttering something about a mistake, but no one believed him. His mother began to cry, and one of his friends shook his head in disbelief. The truth was right there on the screen, undeniable, humiliating. I didn't shout or throw anything. I just turned off the TV, looked around the room, and said, "Dinner's over." Then I walked away. I didn't need to stay to see the rest. The silence behind me said everything. That night, Adam's world began to crumble, and for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt free. The moment the slideshow ended, everything changed. Adam's confident mask shattered. He begged me, pleading for forgiveness, telling half-truths and excuses. He tried to explain, to point fingers, to say it was a mistake. At one point, he dropped to his knees in front of me, eyes full of panic. But words were useless. The proof had already done its work. I had already decided what I needed to do to protect myself. That night, I handed him the divorce papers I'd prepared earlier. I wasn't angry in a loud way. I was steady, tired, and resolute. I told him there was no bargaining, no more lies, and no more pretending. The life we built together was over. He looked stunned, like the choice hadn't truly landed in his chest until it was in ink. In the days that followed, consequences rolled faster than either of us expected. His boss called him in after seeing screenshots that had been forwarded. The company launched an internal inquiry, worried about how his behavior could affect clients and the firm's image. Within a week, he had been put on leave and then let go. Losing his job hit him hard. It was his pride and his livelihood all at once. Sabrina disappeared from his life almost as quickly. Once the evidence was public, she faced her own decision. The messages that had once felt private were now weighty and embarrassing. She distanced herself, claiming she wanted no part of the fallout. Within days, she stopped answering his calls. When he finally reached her, she told him it was over. The same person who seemed so eager to share secret smiles and weekend plans now refused to speak to him in front of other people. His family reaction was quieter, but more painful. His mother stopped answering texts and avoided my calls for a long time. When she did speak, her voice was hollow and guarded. Friends who had once praised him began to pull away. People chose sides or simply chose silence. The network of support he had counted on evaporated, leaving him isolated in a way I had never been. Neighbors talked. Rumors spread to people we knew and to the wider circle that had cheered at our wedding. I did not seek public humiliation, but I did not hide from the truth either. I made sure my steps were legal and measured. I wanted to walk away with my dignity intact, not to watch him suffer for the sake of spectacle. Yet suffering came anyway, as consequence does when someone's choices break trust so completely. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Losing him felt like losing a part of my past, even if that part had been built on lies. I grieved not just for the marriage, but for the version of us that might have been. At the same time, I was grateful to step out of a life where secrets lived in the corners. He called, sent messages, begged for another chance. I read them, then filed them away. My answer was final. I wanted a clean break and a future I could shape without betrayal shadowing every decision. The hard work of rebuilding began, and though it hurt, I felt steadier by the day. The lesson he learned was sharp and personal. Choices have costs, and some losses cannot be easily repaired. The months after the divorce were some of the hardest of my life. The house that once felt warm now felt empty, filled with reminders of what I'd lost. Every corner held a memory: the couch where we watched movies, the kitchen where we laughed over burnt pancakes. I knew I couldn't heal there. So, I sold the house, packed what truly mattered, and left Denver behind. I drove until the mountains turned into coastline, and the air smelled like salt and pine. I found a quiet town in Oregon, small but peaceful, with streets lined by art shops and cafes. The ocean was just a short walk away, and the sound of the waves at night made it easier to breathe. I rented a small cottage and began rebuilding my life from scratch. For the first few weeks, it felt strange to be alone. I'd wake up expecting someone beside me, or reach across the table for a second cup that wasn't there. But as time passed, the silence became comforting instead of heavy. It was a silence I chose, one filled with peace instead of secrets. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. Back when I was with Adam, I always said I'd open an art studio someday, but life got in the way. Now there were no excuses left. I rented a small space downtown and began spending my days surrounded by color and canvas. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. At first, it was just a few people walking in to browse or talk. Then slowly, more visitors came. Some bought pieces, others signed up for classes I started offering on weekends. Watching people find joy in creating something with their own hands made me feel alive again. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something that gave me purpose. Emily visited often. She brought laughter back into my days and reminded me of who I was before everything fell apart. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she said, "Peace isn't revenge, but sometimes it feels like it." We both laughed, knowing how true that was. I didn't need to see Adam fail or suffer anymore. My peace was the real victory. There were still moments when I thought about the past, but they no longer hurt the same way. They felt distant, like an old movie I'd watched too many times. The pain had faded into lessons about strength, boundaries, and the danger of losing yourself for someone else. I began to feel lighter. My days filled with new faces, quiet mornings, and the simple joy of being content. I was no longer Laura, the wife who'd been betrayed. I was Laura, the artist, the woman who had survived heartbreak and turned it into something beautiful. The life I was building wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that was enough. Months later, when life had finally settled into something calm and steady, I got a message from an unknown number. For a second, I almost ignored it, but something in me knew who it was before I even opened it. It was from Adam. His message was short, just a few words that carried the weight of everything that had happened. I lost everything. I wish I could undo it. I stared at the screen for a while, my heart surprisingly steady. There was a time when a message like that would have broken me, made me cry or question if I'd done the right thing. But not anymore. I didn't feel anger or pity, just a quiet sense of peace. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve answers, and sometimes silence says everything that needs to be said. I set the phone down and looked out the window at the waves crashing against the rocks. The ocean had become my reminder that life moves on, no matter how rough the storm. I thought about how far I'd come, from being a wife who doubted herself to a woman who stood up, fought back, and found her own freedom. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about destroying him. It was never about making him suffer the way he made me suffer. It was about taking back the control he thought he had over me. He broke my trust, but I rebuilt myself. That was the real win. The pain he caused became the fire that pushed me toward a stronger version of myself, one that didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. I'd learned that sometimes life teaches its own lessons. People like Adam think they can lie and cheat without consequences, that love makes their partner blind. But love doesn't make you blind, it just makes you patient. And when that patience runs out, it reveals truth sharper than any revenge could. I knew he had lost his job, his reputation, even Sabrina. He had no one left to blame but himself. Maybe deep down, he finally understood what he had thrown away. Not just a marriage, but a woman who would have stood by him through anything if he'd been honest. But by the time realization comes, it's usually too late. I took a deep breath and smiled faintly. The pain, the tears, the betrayal, it all led me to this moment of quiet strength. I didn't need to send him a message back, because life had already delivered the message for him. He thought his wife would never find out. But she did. And she didn't just find out, she rose above it. She taught him a lesson he would never forget, not with anger, but with grace. And that, I realized, was the sweetest kind of revenge there is, living free, peaceful, and unbothered while the truth speaks for itself.